track. Sonia reminds me that we are 10% through our slides. No, we're getting through. All right. So here's 11%. All right. So now we're going to start talking about the flow chart. And for those of you who did print out the handout, it includes the DTSC determining flow chart. So where do you start on the flow chart? If you look at the flow chart, the first thing that you need to do is figure out what kind of waste you have. And figuring out what kind of waste you have depends on what the point of generation. So let's see an example. Let's say you have a process tank, right? And the process tank is discharging into a settling tank. And the decant comes off. And the goo that settles down gets pumped out of the bottom of the settling tank into a heated drying tank. Let's say that, based on sampling and or other, generator determination methods, the waste coming out of this process tank is non-hazardous, not a hazardous waste. Goes into the settling tank. In the settling tank, the decant that comes off is discharged to the sewer. That is also a non-hazardous waste based on generator determination and sampling. The sludge and goo that settles, that comes out of the pipe, that is a hazardous waste based on sampling, knowledge of the process, etc. And that sludge that comes out gets chunked into this heated drying tank. So the first question is, what waste is used to determine what treatment tier this may fall under? A or B? Waste A or waste B? Really? How many guys say A? Don't believe me. Waste B. Why is it waste B? These are potential clients. Right, because B is the one that's hazardous. Trust me, I'm the consultant. Waste B is hazardous.
Yes.
No.
Well, but the point,
no.
The initial, right.
No.
But the waste point of
no.
generation. Oh, I feel the burn.
Actually, this will burn. The point of generation, when you're concerned about, are you doing hazardous waste treatment, right? If you check here, it's like, no, this stuff's not hazardous, right? And what's coming out here is not hazardous. That's not the hazardous waste point of generation, right? You dump it in the settling tank. What's the point of generation for this hazardous waste be? The bottom of the settling tank. That's the point of generation for the hazardous waste that you use to make a tier determination. Bob?
If process tank A is not hazardous, why don't you just send it down the drain from there?
Perhaps it doesn't meet sewer conditions. Perhaps your wastewater discharge permit says, nah, we only want 5 ppm metals. Well, it's got more than that. So there may be other, that's a good question, there may be other reasons why you can't just discharge it directly. All right? So, all right, anyway, so use B. All right? It goes in a heated drying tank. What's the second question? So where is the regulated treatment occurring for tiered permitting? Heated drying tank, anybody else?
In the pipe.
Not in the piping. It's in the heated drying tank. If the regulated hazardous waste that's being generated, it's being this is a generating process. This is generating a hazardous waste. You're not treating a hazardous waste. You're treating a non-hazardous waste. But as part of that non-hazardous waste treatment, it generates a hazardous waste. The hazardous waste that's being generated is being treated in the heated drying tank. This is where the regulated hazardous waste treatment is occurring. This is very similar to the oil water separator, where you have very dilute, oily wastewaters coming into a clarifier, right? Maybe not able to dump it down the sewer, but it doesn't meet hazardous waste characteristics. Doesn't kill fish, not enough metals in it, right? Not reactive, right? But it goes into the clarifier, and then it settles out. The oils float up to the top. You pump out the oils, right? So, the generating process, that's a non-hazardous waste. This is really what you're concerned about. This is not permitted treatment because you're generating a hazardous waste. You're not treating the hazardous waste in here. You're treating it in the heated drying tank.
I was the dots.
Going with the flow. What?
I was the dots.
So,
All right.
we don't.
All right. So we're going to go with the flow. Find out the waste stream. There's 19 that are listed, some subcategories, and it gets confusing. Basically, it's kind of in a hierarchy. So you start with 1. If you fit in 1, you stop. Don't go on and see if you fit in 13. If it's not listed, it's not eligible. Simple as that. What the waste stream you have might be listed on there, but what you're doing to it, if it's not listed on there, you can't do that. You have to choose one of the other technologies. So the waste stream number on the flow chart is not necessarily the same as waste stream number on the forms. There's a disconnect on that. So you have to watch that. Don't assume that because it's 5 here, that when you get to the notification forms, just check box number 5 because I found it number 5 on the flow chart.
Okay, so continuing on the flow chart, right? So after you figured out, okay, this is what my waste stream is, and some of these are conditional, but here's what my waste stream is. Okay, then you go to the treatment methods. And up here, down here, and a list of them, you know, here's a treatment method: adsorption, distillation, biological processes, air stripping, etc. And a question came up at the break. So, well, you know, you have this volatile organic compound, this methylene chloride, that's going through, you know, an air scrubber. You know, how do you control the VOCs? Is that regulated under tiered permitting? Well, what the question is that an air pollution treatment system or an air pollution control system? If it is, isn't that out up front under that Health and Safety Code exemption for air pollution control systems? Yeah. So you stop there. You're not even near the flow chart because it's out up front as exempt treatment. Right? So again, if it's not listed, it's not eligible. Right? So if you're doing supercritical fluid extraction, can you fall under tiered permitting for this waste? No. It says no. No, if it's not listed. And you also want to look for any qualifiers. Some tiers have qualifiers. For example, you know, you have an aqueous waste with organic compounds meeting these limitations, and you're distilling it as part of the waste treatment, right? Well, then you go, okay, so I have my waste, it's a listed treatment. Okay, well, how much am I treating? Well, I'm treating less than or equal to 55 gallons per month per facility. If you are, you can fall under conditionally exempt small quantity treatment, right? It's like, well, no, sometimes I'm treating 60 gallons. Well, then you're under PBR.
And this is a big difference between
huge difference.
Conditionally exempt small quantity treatment, almost no requirements, to PBR, which is the maximum number of requirements.
Right, so a facility that's familiar with the flow chart, they're going to send you the application. They're going to say, well, yeah, we treat 54.5 gallons per month. What do you ask? Yeah. You know, what's the data? Is that how consistent is the waste stream? How do they assure that? How do they measure that? How do they monitor that? You know, do they ever have any spikes? Which would kick them out? This doesn't say average, does it? Right? So it kind of tells you. And plus, if you're the facility folks, and you're like, man, you know, our process, we're generating, you know, 50, 60, 70 gallons a month. Now they could apply some pollution prevention, you know, methodology to see what can we do to treat less of a volume, to generate less of a volume, to kick us into this lower tier.
So let's say you had an anodizing plant that had separate baths that were less than 55 gallons, and if they treat them all at once, it's a big batch treatment, like 2 times a year. Could they get into a lower tier by staggering the treatment over months?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
because
so
this is, you know, as Steve mentioned, the conditionally exempt, the lowest tier, you know, treating a big volume with hardly any hazard, treating hazardous, really hazardous stuff, very low batches. So yeah, they can accumulate it, again, with generator accumulation limitations. They can accumulate it, and all right, let's 50-gallon batch for this month. Yeah. Now let's treat that. I'd want to see some good records of that, but that's perfectly acceptable.
Those are definitely things as a facility that you're going to want to do to try to have ease of management.
Yes.
This is the goal, to be here or to be off of here. If you can figure out a way to get out of tiered permitting. And what's the most common way to get out of tiered permitting? No.
Leave California. No.
You have an operation. You generate waste. You need to do something with the waste. Recycling. That's the biggest thing. You know, a lot of these people. We're talking about all these wastewaters. One of the big things they can do is clean up the water. Instead of discharging it to the sewer, they put it back into their process. Now, remember I said earlier that 99.9% of the waste was water? What if you reclaimed almost all of the water? So it's almost 100% recycling. That's a great deal. Now you don't have any discharge going to the sewer, and you're no longer in tiered permitting. Is there advantages to being out of tiered permitting? Heck yeah, it almost makes it worth the... Exactly. It almost makes it worthwhile to do the recycling just to get out of tiered permitting.
Yeah.
Forget the value of the water. You know, you don't have to meet all these other... And wait till we get to the requirements. We haven't even gotten to the requirements.
Yeah, we're not going to get to that till 2 o'clock today. And if you have... And for you facilities, if you end up with a notice of violation for a tiered permit problem, they make you sit and watch this video. All right. And for the it doesn't, it's not clear looking at the flow chart. Most of the requirements are post-treatment. I shouldn't say most. Many of the requirements are post-treatment. Many of the requirements are pre-treatment. If it doesn't say otherwise, assume it is all pre-treatment requirements and limitations. You're going to treat 55 gallons per month or less. You're going to treat 55 or more than 55 gallons per month. And some, volume, 55 gallons per month doesn't say per unit or per facility, kind of is per facility unless it specifies otherwise. Less than 1,400 parts per million, concentration going in, unless it says concentration coming out. All right, so you do need to read these things.
They're very unique. Almost each one is individually written, so you have to look at it. It doesn't follow any format. It's not always 55 gallons. It's not always 1,400 ppm.
Yeah, and you take a look. I mean, 55 gallons per month per facility, per unit, right? 10% acid, acid or base by weight, right? And again, going from, you want to be in you want to be in conditional authorization rather than PBR. So maybe if it's a flow-through system, that would be better rather than a batch system that's treating 1,000 gallons at a time. Or maybe you split it up to have, 450 per batch. So this really does give you, gives a facility a lot of flexibility and something to think about. How can they tweak and change their process and change their treatment to get into lower tiers? And a lot of facilities don't understand that, or they don't realize that. And then look at the flow, okay, here's what it is, and they send it in. This is a great submission management tool.
Does that create an incentive to not treat some of your waste then, to stay in one tier over the other?
It may. That's a management decision. Generally speaking, it's always going to be better to treat your waste than just ship it off-site. But it's a management decision that the facility is going to make. Maybe they don't want the capital cost. One of my clients, they generate a lot of dilute rinse waters from the plating operation. They don't have a sewer connection. They were putting it in totes, shipping it out a couple times a week. Like, you guys really need to get a treatment system to use your water. You can't, it's real critical control. We don't want, you need to do it. After about 3-4 months of generating a bunch of totes, they're like, you know what, we're going to put one in. Saves them a ton of cash. Woo! End of the chart. Okay, so we're into the flow chart, right? So again, you take a look at the tier. When you look at the flow chart, you also take a look. Sometimes you see these little asterisks things, and you go down to the bottom, and it's okay. It must be hazardous solely due to this characteristic. So, let's say you're treating an acidic waste, right? And you look at the flow chart. Okay, I have it's an inorganic acid or alkaline waste. Maybe it's sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid waste or ammonia waste, right? And you go through, okay, it's an 8A waste. What am I doing to it? I'm doing some pH adjustment to it. Okay, great. How much am I doing? Well, I'm doing, 80 gallons per month. All right, how much? So you could figure out where you're at, right? But let's say, okay, I'm treating 80 gallons per month, but it's only 5% acid, right, or 5% base. Can you be in conditionally authorized? Sure. Unfortunately, when you do the analysis on the acid, it turns out it's also hazardous because of nickel. Guess what? You're not an 8A because it's not hazardous because of this, right? So no, you don't get that because it's hazardous due to another factor. It's not just pH that renders it hazardous. And when you're looking at the flow chart, when you're looking at 8A, the only thing that makes it hazardous is its corrosivity, not metals, not reactivity. So your typical plating waste streams that may have higher low pH, that have metals in them, like an ammoniacal copper waste, maybe hazardous for copper, it's not going to be waste. So keep that.
I have a facility that wants to use oxalic acid to etch titanium. Oxalic acid is an organic acid. Based on the flow chart, it says you can't do it, but when I went to the health and safety code, it doesn't say anything about it not being having to be inorganic.
It may be one of the other waste streams listed, but it's not an 8A. If we go back, let's see. Aqueous waste with organic compounds. Don't forget, aqueous waste, you know, maybe it's in a water matrix, but I mean, it may fall under a different waste stream, you know, may fall under a different waste stream under the flow chart, but it's not going to be an 8A.
But when I went to the health and safety code, the references there, that section, it doesn't say anything about it having to be inorganic. I don't know where on the flow chart they got the inorganic.
We'd have to look at one of the flow charts.
That's interesting. It should follow that. There were written descriptions, and then they were put together in the chart. The chart is from the written descriptions, so they should match. That's a DTSC question, not the instructors. That's a good question. I don't know. We don't get to write them. We just teach them.
If somebody printed everything out for Tasty Fireball, if you want to start flipping through the flow chart, see if you can find something that addresses organic acids. I think I remember it being in there, but I don't. The things for verification when you're reviewing the form, when you're filling out the form. Although you don't really want to go from the waste stream number on the flow chart to anything. When you look at the flow chart, for example, the 3A, aqueous waste with organic components with limitations, and I'm treating it by these methods. When you treat it by these methods, and you have PBR, what forms do you fill out? If you're going to be treating it, you fall under PBR. What form do you fill out? The PBR form, right, is one of those. You have PBR form. Hey, it's aqueous waste with organic compounds treating by these methods. Okay, well this, I'm treating it by this way, is permit by rule, that kind of matches this and this and this, right? And then you look at these requirements, okay, aqueous waste, okay, this matches this, what I'm doing here matches this. It's kind of a good double check.
Yeah, the numbers may not match, but the information should match up.
Yeah.
All right, so current forms. The forms have not been updated. The flow chart's been updated, but not the forms, except for cyanide. There was an additional for the cyanide. That's the only update. So a lot of it is old. We're switching to CIRS, and then you guys are having probably your own system in-house as well. So you got to address how you're collecting the information, and I have not seen the electronic. We did not put that here because we're not up to speed on where they're at for the electronic forms.
Yeah, it's likely that the electronic tiered permit forms and CIRS very closely match this. I don't know if the working group elected to update the electronic forms to match health and safety code changes or any regulatory changes. You look at some of these forms, Unified Form, 1999, right? And that may be a good song. Well, no, it's not a good song. But, it's like, for example, there's tiered permit forms. There's tiered permit forms that address aerosol can puncturing under a tiered permit. Well, it doesn't apply anymore because the statute changed. They haven't updated the forms. So just kind of keep that in mind. There's no provision to update the forms. If there's anybody on the CIRS committees, not a question to ask them. Right, and a lot of Coupas have made their own forms. There's nothing that says you can't. You know, if you're like, you know what, I'm tired of seeing these old, ratty, out-of-date forms. Make your own form. You know, it's like here, in this county or in this jurisdiction, tiered permitting, here's the form that we use. If you're going to have your own SERS portal, make your own and keep it and update it. You know, there's nothing prohibiting that. The forms are not in regulation. The information is. But, so, you know, just kind of keep that in mind. Woohoo. You know, there's some fact sheets that are out there. They tend to be a little old. Most of them are still mostly accurate. About the newest one is PBR, but that was still...
that's the oldest. The other ones were updated in 2005. Oh, yeah. So the CA and the CEs were updated. PBR, the last update was in 2003.
Yeah, but you know, they're still good fact sheets. You know, it's still pretty much accurate.
All right, so the exercise. Not sure how we're going to do this. We've found one of the really benefits of doing the class is for you guys to get familiar with doing the stuff. So how many people have a flow chart with them? So a couple people. So probably what we're going to do is I'm going to pass these out. We're going to talk about the questions and the answers.
Hard if they don't have the flow chart.
And you guys can write down the answers. The people that attended last year, this is the same exercise as last year, so it's the same answers. But you can take it back and go through the flow chart back at work. You can also use this as a tool for the other inspectors at your agency and give them an opportunity. It's a good practice to get out that flow chart and do some real world situations. So I tried to, here I'll give you half, Steve. You have that side on.
I have the easy side.
I think
you have one?
I think there's 4.
Look how high tech you are. This Sharpie? Trying to text and hand out at the same time, it's not working.
He can drive and text, though.
No, I can't. My wife's texting me, hey, forgot your computer at home. Now I got to go run home and get my computer. I think that's it.
Really? We didn't know the status.
And I think they're going to take
So this is going to speed up the class because in the past we've given you guys like 20 minutes to find the answers. We'll just give them to you. They're coming up with a new thing where we can give you guys clickers and then ask you guys questions and you answer them and then it gets posted up there. So that's something that we will definitely use in the future. There's 4. One more? Okay.
Steve.
I'll make it over that way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to use Steve Lichten's answers from last year. So if they're wrong, that's Steve's fault.
Which Steve?
Well, that's true. Either way, right?
There's no way to... It's hard if they don't have the flow chart.
It's impossible, so we're just going...
It's impossible. It's not so simple.
Can I use the flow chart, though?
Yes, me say, yo.
All right, so...
It is on the internet. So if you have your smartphone, you could URL the flow chart.
The first question says, Acme Wheels Corporation generates an aqueous waste with 2,000 parts per million of chromium-3. So it's very specific. The company treats the waste in 300-gallon tank and generates 1,200 gallons of waste per month. They use pH adjustment to treat the waste for corrosivity and remove the metals prior to the waste going to the sewer. So we got some pretty decent information. The answer on that one is 2A. And that's asking what tier is it going to be, and it's a PBR. So if we go to 2A, it says aqueous waste with metals listed in Title 22. So these are the toxic metals. And we go over and it lists the treatment. One of them is pH adjustment, and that's the type of treatment that they were doing. And then the criteria was batch, how much, there's it greater than or less than 55 gallons. In our scenario, they were doing 1,200 gallons per month, so that's greater than 55. The concentration is greater than 1,400 parts per million, so it fell into PBR. So that's basically the kind of information that you need to make a determination on the flow chart. There was a lot of detail in that, right? The next one, number 2, bright metal ink generates waste plating waters with metal and cyanide from their rinsing process. They generate 1,500 gallons of waste per month that is batch treated in 200-gallon tank using bleach to destroy the cyanide. Okay, so this is a cyanide treatment. It's going to be an aqueous with so you just put A. So if we go to the bottom of the flow chart, the cyanide sections, because we're dealing with cyanide, we look at the first one, A, aqueous waste from rinsing workpieces and fixtures. So this was from a rinsing process that's consistent with that. And then the type of treatment was bleaching, oxidation by bleach, and PBR. So the answer to that one is A, PBR. All the cyanides have letters, not numbers. So that's the new section of the flow chart that was added. Any questions on that one?
Yes.
Okay. How we got to there? Yes. The flow chart, at the back of the flow chart.
Yeah, and part of what you need to do is, the more familiar you are with the flow chart, the first time you look at the flow chart, shouldn't be the first time that you're processing an application. Now, you go through it a couple of times. All right, cyanides, oh yeah, they're all the way at the back. Keep flipping, keep flipping. Really? 710.
What's that?
PBR collection. Page 22. Towards the back.
Okay.
No wonder they audit my tax returns every year.
Is
I said all the way at the back. It's not quite all the way.
Okay. Did you find it? Okay. So it says cyanide treatment. It's got the code section, all the different technologies that are allowed for it. So we're good for number 2. All right, let's go on to number 3. Your company treats waste acidic acid from the process line by using pH adjustment neutralization. The waste is hazardous for pH only. You generate 700 gallons of waste acid per month, and the concentration of waste is 27%. We came up with that it was not allowed. And this goes back to the question earlier. On inorganic versus organic. Acetic acid is an organic acid. So just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean it, or your treatment makes sense, doesn't mean it's on the table. Because there's another one that we'll talk about that isn't covered as well. And it could be something that you run into all the time. But remember, if it's not on the flow chart, it's not tiered permitting. And I think that was the reason I put that on there.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit.
Yeah, it's not on the flow chart.
Yes.
If we come across that new inspection, we've actually referred it writing that to the state, and we never heard back. Sent it to the feds, and never heard back either. Was
Well, you have to send it to the state, not the feds.
yeah, but they didn't do it. They didn't respond, so we sent it to the feds instead.
Did you send it to the right address? You know, they're in Sacramento now. I don't know. You know how it is. You got to call, and you have to keep calling. You have to send more letters. You have to say grand prize enclosed.
But that I would think that they would be the ones that would make a final determination. You know, the Koopas have authority for the tier permitting program. But if it gets too technical, the state should assist on it.
Yeah.
Waste determinations, you know, if somebody wants to get a variance from having their waste be hazardous waste, that's not the Koopas, that's the state that's going to do that.
Right.
So there is some requirement or burden put on the state to have that authority and not the Koopas.
Print out a copy, give it to this guy. He's with DTSC.
All right, so let's go on to number 4. Yes? What's that? Do I have more sheets of questions?
More of the... Yeah.
Are they the right year?
I don't know.
Well, it says
Where's the
2000.
stack?
That's we're in 2013 already.
Here's the stack.
Sure, who needs it?
They were the
Can I
same.
give you one?
All right, let's go on to number 4, slippery widgets. They generate a used oil mixed with water. The water is not hazardous, that it runs through a heated process, 190 degrees, to separate the oil and discharge the water to the sewer. The used oil is manifested off-site to be reclaimed. The company generates 1,500 gallons of used oil per month. Again, a lot of detail on this. So this answer was 10C.
And if you have the flow chart, why would it be 10C?
So 10 is dealing with used oil. So this is where you would start. You would look at 10A probably. It says used oil, unrefined oil, waste mixed oil. But as you go into detail, there was something in C, used oil mixed with water. Okay? Hazardous only because of the oil content, excluding contaminated groundwater containing gasoline. So that's the criteria for 10C. And if we look at our question, it was oil mixed with water where the water was not hazardous. So it seems to fit that better than used oil, unrefined oil, mixed with water.
Yeah, 10A, it's a lot of oil, a little bit of water. 10C, a lot of water mixed with a little bit of oil. Now, whenever you see the 10s, again, the question is that a hazardous waste? Does it meet the criteria? And for oily water, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. For watery oil, it does.
But there's not going to be a lot of difference on the tiers on these.
Right.
So if I go to the treatments, we were doing heat, and it says overheating below the flash point, that's what we're doing. And then I go over to the right, and it says, if recovered used oil is properly transported to an authorized off-site oil recycler. They're giving me kind of a break for having it recycled, and I'm conditionally exempt limited. The limiting means that I am doing something that's benefiting the environment out of it, so I'm being regulated less. If not, it sends me to 10A or 10B, which is going to be more strictly regulated. Yes, I saw a question. Okay. Again, we haven't finished everything. We still got lots more to go. All right. Number 5, a research company is treating their laboratory waste on site. Are they exempt? Well, what additional information do you need? you need to know how is it treated.
Yeah, remember all those conditions.
That's where you want to get back to that slide that we have on that exemption and find out, what they're doing. So again, a lot of detail. That's where this presentation can really assist you as a reference guide. You don't have to go looking through all the regulations. We've got it all put together there for you.
So are there any limitations on that treatment? Yeah, there's volume, quantity, methodology, who's doing it.
All kinds.
All kinds.
I caught that right on time.
Okay. Number 6, company disposes of waste resins by mixing the components together in accordance with the manufacturer's instruction and puts the non-hazardous byproduct to the trash. Can the company do this? Yes or no? Well, the answer is yes. And it's covered under 12, resins.
And this is a lesson in participation in the regulatory development process. At the time a lot of the tiered permit regulations were being developed, DTSC held a couple of public meetings on it. And at the time I worked for Hughes Aircraft, and our biggest cost waste management was expired resins and adhesives, multi-component stuff. We didn't generate a huge amount, but it was our highest dollar cost by far. So we were at the meetings, and Dave Liu from DTSC when he was back at DTSC. So why can't we just mix it in accordance with the manufacturer's directions? But click it, and write something up. So we drafted something up, and they tweaked it, and it got in there, and that was our exemption. So if, for you facilities and the Koopas should know this. If you see something that really doesn't make sense or something that maybe ought to be changed, you can participate in the process. Once that process is open, if there's enough need for something to change,
right.
You can participate in it and send in your information.
How hazardous is that material after it's been reacted? Non-hazardous.
Right.
So by allowing you to do that, you're taking 2 hazardous materials and making a non-hazardous. Do you think that's beneficial to the environment?
Yeah.
Does it make sense to do that?
Well, better than a bunch of hazardous waste.
Hazardous waste that you're going to. Well, again, that's why they have the conditions.
The manufacturer's instructions,
right.
So you don't blow up.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Last one.
So this was a good one. A business using 150-gallon plastic tote bins. Do you think those exist in the real world? Sure they do. I mean, they go all the way up to like 225, right?
330s, intermediate bulk containers.
Okay. So that's a standard use for these. And plastic tote bins that contained hydrochloric acid, they want to wash the container prior to reusing it. The tote bins are not exempt per 22 CCR because they cannot physically get those things upside down so every drop is out of them. It's too big of a container. They're emptied as practical as possible, but they don't meet the definition of empty. Okay? So they want to use a tier to clean these out so they can reuse them. Can they do this under tier permitting? And the answer is no. So this is a good one. If you look on there Steve didn't write the number on. It's 11A. So it says containers of capacity of 110 gallons or less. So anything that's larger than 110 gallons is not going to be allowed. It's the same process. It's going to generate the same waste, but for some reason they didn't include it in there. If it's not included...
Where did that 110-gallon limit come from? 2 drums, and it's some obscure definition of what a bulk container is, and that definition in various regs, including DOT, has morphed over the years.
Reused it on site, did that fall under one of the...
Yes.
Recycling.
What if you use that rinsate in the same manner as you would use the other stuff? Is that on-site recycling for on-site reuse?
Or I mean, you're reusing the container.
Right.
I don't know about that. I'd have to think about that because it's not an exempt container. So you're not getting any, if you reuse it, it's excluded from being a waste. It doesn't fit under that.
You could, or you would consider I'm decontaminating it, but now you're generating that 100 and Humpty Dump gallons of hazardous waste. You could probably make a case, well, no, I'm just decontaminating it. I'm not treating it. You're reusing it, but
Right.
This is kind of the stuff that you get into. Bob. If it's going back to the process, yeah. Correct. So your pesticide, herbicide stuff that's getting triple rinsed and reused doesn't count for tiered permit. As long as you reuse the drums, yeah. But I mean we're gonna have to look at that.
I don't know, yeah. But it's not listed on here. These are containers.
Find us at lunch, we'll have an answer.
And it says rinsing. So if that's what you're doing, it seems to be covered. And if it's greater than, I have a feeling that it would not be allowed. Because it's, they've addressed all containers under a certain size for the operation that you're talking about. If you're doing something that's outside of that, then it sounds to me like you would have to contact the state and get a permit to do that through the state, not a tiered permit. Why else would it be on the chart?
Tell you what, we will get a definitive answer, and when we do, we'll put it in a PDF and I'll post that to the conference website under this class.
And you
So
could actually
periodically
send
check
it to everybody because you have
I will.
everybody.
Well, everybody who registered.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll address it. Just keep checking back the website. But that's a good question.
All right, so let's keep going.
Okay. All right, cyanide. We used to cover the cyanide treatment and the PBR stuff in much more detail.
Because it was new.
Now it's not so new. You still have the overheads in your presentation that may still be up on the cloud. So we're not really going to go through it, but it's very detailed with the specific requirements and what it is, but we've already covered it.
All right, so let's talk about unit. A treatment unit is, and this is a good definition because this is one of the key things as an inspector you're looking for. So it's a treatment unit is a combination of treatment tanks, systems, and or containers that are located together, used in sequence, treat compatible hazardous waste streams.
Is that you making that noise?
No, I think that's are plumbed together and or otherwise linked to form a single system. So usually units, we talk about it being permanently linked. So one of the games that you can play if you don't want something to be part of a unit is maybe not have it permanently attached. I mean, you could use a flex hose and it could be on wheels and you move it around. That would not necessarily be permanently linked.
Correct, but keep in mind if it's not permanently linked, it may not be considered a closed enclosed treatment facility for the EPA exemptions. And what you want to look at is, and this is where it makes it very difficult to just look at a drawing. It has to be a good drawing. And you have to go walk it down in the field. You really do. Even though you don't have to pre-approve the tiered permit application. Because what you're looking at are the treatment steps, or the treatment operations, is the treatment tank itself. And there may be more than one of those. Are they located together? What does together mean? Are all you guys together? Yeah. Are all you guys together? Are you guys together with these guys? I don't know. How much is it in a different room? Is it across the facility? Are they located together? Are they used in sequence? In other words, do you treat, you pipe, you treat, you pipe, you treat, you pipe? As opposed to, well, I'm treating, and then I'm combining. Well, or am I treating and then combining? You have to walk the process down. We're going to see some flowchart examples. Like here's a simple one.
It's so simple.
He's so simple.
So we've got Chrome 6. and we're doing a Chrome 6 reduction. After going through that reduction, we're adding another waste stream that contains zinc, and that's going over because that particular one doesn't need the reduction, so we skip that process, just feed it in, goes in its flocculant, and then goes off for pH adjustment. And when it goes to there, there's some other materials that can also use pH adjusting, so they're added in. We have the arrow here going in, but I mean the arrow could come and tie in right here so that they tie in. Probably would represent the actual flow better. They probably don't have two pipes go in. Probably feed it in here the same as they're doing this. So we've got these things linked in sequence. We've got a treatment, a treatment, a treatment, and discharge here. So each one of these is tied to the other ones. Nothing else is happening to these before being fed into the system.
Right. What if you were to put a pre-neutralization step right here? See here, you treat, you pipe, you treat, you pipe, you treat, you pipe. You're treating, your pipe's connecting. But what if you had another treatment operation right here? Then you're going to be treating and then combining.
That would be more than one unit.
Right, so then that becomes its own separate unit here.
Right,
a lot of times businesses just go, oh, we treat our wastewater.
Yeah.
That's what they just...
You need a process flow diagram. It's really what you
All right, so here's another example of rinse water going into a collection tank. And I think, Steve, just for speed.
Yeah, okay, so, the assumptions, I'm assuming this rinse water is hazardous, right? Goes into a collection tank. Anything happening in here? Probably not, right? Then you have conversion coating water, goes through ion exchange, probably hazardous as well, so then it goes into this equalization tank, neutralization tank, hits a clarifier, sample box out to the sewer. But then there's some other process, the spent plating bath's hazardous, right? Goes into a batch tank where all this stuff is added, right? And then the decant goes to the filter press, and then the solids go out. How many units? Remember, it's almost like you have to walk it down. What's the flow? Are you treating and then combining? How many say, I don't know how many units, but I know it's more than one? All right. How many say 2? 3? Why would you say 2? I'm not handing out the laser. Well, that's one of the considerations. That's why it's hard to look at a diagram. I don't know. Let's say it is. But I mean, if it's not, maybe that's a different unit. Right? And that doesn't necessarily put them into a different tier, but they may have an additional unit form that they have to submit. Right? This is kind of what we got. Right? Rinse water is just being held. You treat, you pipe, you treat, you pipe. This is sort of one unit, and this would be a unit, because you're treating, then you're combining 2 units.
And the filter press could be in either one. You could include the filter press over here,
right,
and have the red be here, and then have the light blue be here. But it's more than one, right? We all agree with that.
Now, what about the spent baths?
Those spent baths could be more than one, too, depending on if there's...
A question that I would be asking is, what's going on here? Now, the fact that, there's all kinds of stuff being added in here, if this is one tank that they're adding the chemicals into, I mean, that's treatment going on there. Right? And if it's all in one batch tank, it's one unit. Right? Another example, 2 waste streams that go into a surge tank, hits a flock tank, settles out, decant, gets adjusted for the pH. Settlement, filter press, gets pressed out, goes to a TSD facility. 1 unit?
How many people think it's just 1 unit? All right, you guys are doing better.
About 2 units.
So, this is probably 1 unit here, and then you go off here, and then this is a unit itself.
Right. Now, in looking at the flow chart, they kind of say, well, is there any way that I can split this up to get into lower tiers? You could certainly, do that exercise. But ultimately, you're going to look at, okay, I need 2 different units for this, and, and there you go.
Can you separate that by waste stream, by one you're making solid waste stream, and the others?
Now, it's more the process itself that dictate how many units. The process where it's at. Yeah.
I've had a couple facilities that had a treatment, all the treatment going on in one room, a control room.
Yeah.
And then the filter press was outside, hard plumbed in outside over a dumpster. So
I think that, the issue kind of is, and I get choked up, but the issue kind of is, can it be, is the operation and the control over this treatment system here, if this is outside in another area, kind of not well defined though.
it's hard plumbed, but it's not in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs to be located together, and that togetherness is not defined.
It's not defined. There's no solid definition on it. But they have an intent. Why did they say that? It's like one area. What if it's coming from another property and it's piped in? Is that one area? It doesn't seem like it to me. Because there's requirements that you're supposed to do for each unit. So how do you do your inspection? If it's over at, maybe another guy is doing the inspection, he's got his own operating records over there. To me, that starts to become its unit itself.
Last example, doing some chrome reduction, flocculating, coagulating, goes off to pH adjust. So you have a number of different waste streams. They're how many units? More than one? Yeah. But remember, you treat, and then you're kind of combining. So could this be one unit? Well, you treat here. Could you have this be one unit and this be one unit? I mean, you can move the units aside. Right. But, this and this cannot be in the same unit. Right? This and this cannot be in the same unit because they're not in sequence. Yeah.
Get me off there. Why flow equalization and treatment house?
Plural, right? Question's going to be what happens in there. Now,
If there's no treatment benefit, that's just a flow equalization tank, then it's a waste stream coming in here. Right. So then
you can see why you have to ask a lot of questions. And these things are never written in a lot of detail when you look at them or go to the facility. And wait till you see the pictures we have of the facilities.
And for some facilities,
the real life.
For some facilities, you have, well, what's actually happening here? Well, I don't know. Here's the manufacturer I bought this thing from. They don't bought the thing. So, in what can you treat in? Can you treat in a container? Yes. Can you treat in a tank?
Yes.
Can you treat in a sump? Not guilty.
Can you treat on the floor?
We hose down the acids every day. Not so much. How do you know what a wet floor is? Real quick, what's a wet floor?
It's accumulation in the process area in the secondary containment. And we've taught a class. There's now DTSC guidelines on management of wet floors. And it's a reality for plating facilities. It's called drag out. So when they're taking the materials from tank to tank, a certain amount of material lands on the floor.
In some cases, more than a certain amount.
Yeah. So these are examples of wet floors. So what's going on there? Are they treating there? Are they holding material? Is it being fed? There's a lot of problems with this, and this you don't want to treat on the floor.
Right. If it doesn't pass the giggle test, is probably a problem.
All right.
Well, so the ramifications of that, you say you can't treat on the floor and be in the tiered permit program.
The bigger problem is, you know, this is actually a hazardous waste collection and accumulation area.
It gets up more to the record than this level.
Well, there is no, if this is hazardous, right? There is no provision, federal or state, for that to be allowable unless you manage this entire area as a hazardous waste containment building under RCRA, and you're not going to do that.
Can't do that because generators can't have containment buildings.
There you go.
So the only thing it could be is a
problem
tank,
is
and you
you
would have
can't-
to meet the tank requirements for that.
So, as an example, what a lot of facilities do is they have periodic. If you're going to get drag out, if this is considered your containment area, it needs to be pretty clean and dry.
Yeah.
And as you get drips and waste in there, you need to keep up with it to keep it clean. That way, you're not accumulating waste. That's for spill control. As you get spills in there, you clean it out. For my clients that have process floors, I make them do, and hopefully they do it, I make them do a once or twice daily inspection and keep that inspection log just to help document that nothing stays in here. It may get in there, but it gets out right away.
We can't solve wet floors. I mean, we have to go on with tiered permitting.
I would suggest that.
Yeah.
Where would they download that guidance stuff?
It's DTSC's website.
Yeah, you can probably find
Wet floor.
If you have a wet floor, you have much bigger problems than tiered permit.
Yeah.
Facilities under CA or PBR, an engineer every 5 years would have to sign off on that. A flooring and treatment unit.
Right.
One of the reasons why you're not going to do it.
Right. Yeah. So if you guys are doing these facilities, you need to be familiar with that guidance document. Was written initially by Charles Corcoran, and then approved by the attorneys there, and the tag. Yes.
You said the building containment would only apply to treatment as a generator?
The generators are not. Generators can use containers and tanks. They can't use containment buildings. They can't use drip pads.
And a containment building it's a definition under RCRA. Basically, the original intent was you're doing a remediation. You're digging up a bunch of contaminated crud and you're dumping it in a building or dumping it under one of those buildings under a covered area. That whole thing has to contain the waste. So you're talking about secondary containment, liners, monitoring systems, etc. Think of a landfill with a roof over it.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody in the right mind has a containment building unless you're doing big fat remediation. Right? We're not talking about you have a drum storage area within your building. That's not a containment building.
Generators are limited to tanks and containers.
Right. And you can't treat in a waste pile. You can only treat essentially in tanks and containers. That's the short answer. This is a
dryer.
This is a waste evaporator. Right? They take heavy metal containing maybe some high pH circuit board plating residue, right? And they cook it off. Water portion goes up. They get the sludge. They clean that sludge out. Is that something that you potentially can treat in? Yeah. Problem is, if you look, and I know it's hard to look closely, this thing is all busted up and leaking, and it's not been well maintained. This no longer exists. But, that's when you look at them, we're doing waste evaporation of this. Well, okay, that's fine. The problem with these guys treating in this, when do you actually go there and see this? Wouldn't you want to see it before they start treating in it? You're not going to. Unless your program is, they send you the notice, all the paperwork, 60 days before. If you don't put them on a schedule to go inspect them before they fire it up, boom, they fire it up because they don't have to wait for you to show up. They just have to wait for that 60-day holding time, right? So they've been treating for a year. You finally get out there during your inspection. It's like, oh, holy Moses, you can't do this. Well, I've been doing it for a year. Here's your year's worth of violation.
Yeah.
Which is a caution to you facilities. You may want to kind of push we really want you to go look at the system first.
That's why we
take
spent
pictures of it. Get a good application. Go down to the COOP office. Bring donuts. Say, look, can you just take a look at this? Just make sure it, you know.
That's why we spend so much time in the beginning talking about what is treatment. Because when you're out doing inspections, you need to be able to recognize things like this.
Yeah, or like this.
Or like this.
All right, here's the meat and potatoes, right? These are, okay, we've done the forms, you filled out the forms, everybody fills this stuff out. We're going to go through, okay, here's what the forms mean, here's what you have to attach to the forms, here's what you have to do to actually be in compliance. There's a bunch of forms, right? You have the facility form, right? You can have 50,000 treatment units at your facility, one facility form that gets filled out. Then, and how many units you have, one or more unit pages, depending, right? One per unit. Okay. Then I have batteries right there. Okay. Then depending on what tier or tiers the facility or the operation falls under, one or more CECA or PBR pages, right, on the form. Okay. Then for certain tiers, conditional, authorized, or permit by rule, there's a certification of financial assurance. That gets stapled in there. That is a complete application that gets sent in. When you look at some of the forms will say, oh, by the way, there's other stuff that's needed.
Right.
Process flow diagrams, plot plans. You may need a written waste analysis plan. Mostly that would stay on site to be reviewed. Some cases it gets submitted. There may be wastewater discharge records, air permits. Keep those on file, or those need to be on file at the facility for the inspector to review. Flow rate documentation, for example, well, we say it's less than 55 gallons per month. How do you know? When you do your inspection, you're going to want to see that documentation, even though it's not required to be submitted.
I know for PBR renewals, it's like January 1st.
We'll get to. Yeah.
Now, we're talking about the initial forms.
Yeah. So they may submit these, but they need to have these as well.
Right.
Either on file or submitted. Yeah.
What's the intent of the third form? Briefly, the first two make sense. What's the third form? What are you trying to convey?
I don't know. That's a hazardous waste treatment notification. That's what.
I mean, you've already told them the details about your unit.
This one tells you how many units you have.
Is this the same?
And then this is the one that tells you what type, the method of treatment you're using.
And again, by the time you're ready to turn in the application, this is filling these out. It literally is a 5 to 10 minute exercise. It's all the determination before. By the time you're filling out the form, it's like, all right, ding, 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 hit the send.
It's mostly check boxes.
No, I understood. I'm just trying to get it in perspective. So, okay, you have your facility. Yes, I'm a facility. I have these units.
Right.
Now you get to the third one. What am I trying to communicate here? Am I trying to
You're trying to communicate what they want you to communicate. This is not your first Coupa conference.
It is my first.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, don't ever ask, well, why? Well, excuse me, this doesn't make sense. Don't.
Come on, it's government. You should know.
There's no signature or date on this form, which is new. Very recently, I was surprised that you can't really even look at the page of the form. There's no date or a
You guys don't pull DNA off of that? You should.
All right. So they have to be submitted within 60 days prior, shockingly, prior to operating a new TP facility. Amendments within 30 days if you get any of these. Change facility name, waste stream changes. Changes in operation affect the forms. If something you're doing is going to affect the information on the forms, then you got to resubmit. And days or time of fixed treatment operation change. So, again, that's probably the information on the forms. And the forms are not just an exercise in checking the boxes. They're really validation that you are following the rules. I think that was kind of their intent, is if you were able to check the boxes and nod your head as you go through the process, you're following the rules and you should be allowed to do the treatment.
Right. And FTU just means fixed treatment unit. That's different than STFU.
And so what are we looking for? We're looking for money. All of the fees, all the tiers have fees associated with them. PBR and CA, they have a Phase 1 environmental assessment. Now, the Phase 1 environmental assessment is not an all-appropriate inquiry. It's a checklist. And you guys have a copy of the checklist with you. It's very similar. Why do they do this? They want to see, is the site contaminated before you start doing any treatment. They want that site cleaned up. So that's the reason it's going to the DTSC. They're reviewing it. The weird thing is you're self-certifying that the site is clean.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And then various attachments, and the forms will tell you what needs to be attached. We never hear that.
Might as well get it now because we'll never finish.
That doesn't mean you're done and you can get a lunch table.
All right, so let's talk about that Phase 1. PBR CA only, the intent to assist the owner-operator in identifying potentially contaminated areas of their facility which require further investigation or remediation. So it's really something that the state can look at and say, hey, there's a problem out there, it needs to be cleaned up. So you're basically, if you say there's problems, it's going to send a red flag to DTSC. In the past, they've done inspections on facilities that have basically stated that they've got problems because they want to go out there and take a look. So checklist is a process for evaluating the facility for contamination. It's qualitative and subjective, very subjective, based on facility history and how accurately you portray that history and visual observations made during a walkthrough. Who's doing the walkthrough? The business. So they're how honest are they going to be walking around saying, oh, that's a problem? And per DTSC determines if the document or potential contamination requires further investigation. That's the bottom line.
I work for a fire agency, and I've required them to update that when they've closed down like a plating line and they're still in business, and I found contamination of
Well, that should go through the closure.
Yeah, but they didn't close the building.
No, but they closed the unit.
There's no regulatory or statutory provision to update this unless they move from tier to tier. If they don't argue with you, I think it's a great idea to make them update it. Just keep in mind if they
didn't sample for it, and when I'm gone, how's the next inspector going to know that there might be possible?
Right. There's no regulatory requirement for them to update this. There are fire code requirements with regard to facility closure and so forth that you may be able to go to. Just keep in mind, you can ask them to update this. But if they say, nah, it's not required, you may need to be a little bit more creative. And for you businesses, if you're going to leave a mess, that's not going to be good. Because you'll get caught, and there's other issues, more serious form.
Right.
And a couple of things. The
owner or the operator certifies that they do or don't require investigation. This is very subjective. Do you need to use an outside consultant to do this type of Phase 1? Who do you use? Who's the oldest guy at the facility, right? You're just walking around. There's no record search required, no outside quarter mile.
No sampling.
No sampling. It's basically, it's a walk around. Let's say weeds, no weeds. Maybe, staining. How bad's the staining, right? Very subjective. Very subjective. And it applies to the entire facility. You've got this gigantic freaking facility you're treating in this little 40 square foot area. That Phase 1 assessment applies to what? The entire freaking facility. All right? So that's kind of an issue there. And in the handout, there's the checklist and a 14-page instruction sheet on the checklist. Be familiar with it, both from, the COOP, all you're going to do is look to see if it's in there.
Right, DTC is the one that goes through it. I will tell you that DTC used to do a class on how to do the checklist and review it. And some of the photo examples that they used, like a little bit of oil staining in a concrete floor in a garage area with a little tiny,
stress crack in the concrete. I don't know if I'd write
Big crack, sure. Maybe pathway contamination.
but it's very subjective, right? And, you know, the more stuff you write down, expect a knock on the door at some point. So you don't fill it out wrong, but just be aware that that's the intent of this thing. It is not, as Steve mentioned, it's not a Superfund all-appropriate inquiry. This is not the property transfer environmental assessment. It's not an ASTM 1527. It is not that, right? If you're a business and some goon consultant says, yeah, we could do that for you, it'll cost you $2,300, no. No. You're not doing all that work. It's a walkthrough. Everyone, can you guys read? Anyway, it's a checklist, right? Some narrative descriptions.
And right? you guys have copies of this in the handouts.
Right. So I go through a facility real quick.
You're going to go through a facility. That's nice blue, right? That's a nice blue floor by the ammoniated copper etching.
Funny they didn't paint it blue, though.
Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This whole thing is on a polyethylene or polypropylene containment bay, right? That's the staining on the polypropylene. Now we'd make them wash it off and then inspect the polypropylene. The containment looks integral, and that's fine. No no likely contamination. If there are cracks and gaps, well, yeah, then there's an issue. You can write it down. All right?
Is that a sump?
No, that's that cruddy evaporator that fell apart when they tried to move it. But you look at this thing, and the containment is. I mean, look, that ain't. See, you got goo in here that's running through the goo there. And the concrete's not in great shape. Write that down. All right, that's pretty obvious. How about that? It's an issue.
Common, very common.
Yeah. Well, we have containment. Well, not all these. Right. So that's something.
Selective containment.
Yeah. Empty containers upside down in the empty drum storage area.
Good.
Weeds, no weeds.
No staining. Look at this. Goes right off the property.
Actually,
right.
that's a shadow.
But
there's a homeless guy here who's trying to clean my windshield, and I had to take the picture and get out of there. But if you were to get out of your car and look, there would be staining. But I mean, but look at this evidence. I mean, you up and down the block, it was weeds, no weeds, weeds. Something's running off those drums. That you need to write down.
All right. So basic operating requirements. You got to meet hazardous waste generator requirements. It doesn't take you out of that. So how long can you store your waste? Does the waste have to be labeled? Documentation, paperwork, manifesting, all part of it. So contingency plan still there, training, but there's going to be additional things on the training as well. Also must mark the exterior of the units. So if you've got a flocculation tank, it's not really a storage tank, so it's not going to have a waste sticker on it, but it needs to have a unit sticker on it.
Flocculation tank 3, facility name, EPID number.
A question like for batch tanks.
Yeah.
Day tanks. Is that considered to be the accumulation like where hazardous waste with the hazardous waste label?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so what I'm telling people is that the throughput, you have to show your throughput is less than 90 days.
Yes. And essentially records to show that whatever's going in is going out within the required time period. Now, how frequently is waste in there? Essentially, what's the flow-through period? Make something up. No, you make something. Like, if it's daily, right? If it's every day they run through the thing, right? Hazardous waste label, what accumulation start date do you put on that label? Daily. Don't have to keep relabeling it, right? But some kind of documentation, right? Just to show that it's not just for,
right.
The time.
Most plating facilities don't have a problem on holding the waste. They generate so much waste, they got to keep the flow going. It doesn't sit around long. I haven't really seen a facility where the waste is sitting for too long.
But they do need to identify it. And this is kind of a common violation because the signs fall off and all that, and all that stuff. And in the contingency plan, it really should include what happens during waste upsets, not just we have a spill, we throw sorbent on, we run like mad.
So other stuff that they have to have in addition is an inspection schedule and inspection records. This is of the treatment unit, not just of the tanks. And then copies of air water permits compliance records. They have to keep those on hand. And residual management discharge records.
Like manifest of the sludge that they send out.
Which they're going to have to keep that anyway.
The name of the guy that dug the hole in the backyard.
Question about sludges. Okay, you've got an evaporator unit. You've got, let's say, 60 gallons going through per day. That accumulation started when it was generated. But the sludge is accumulating in there. They're cleaning it out twice a year. Now, is that considered to be like a process?
That is an excellent point of generation question, and they address that specific example
tomorrow
in the advanced class. They do, and they have
that's
they have
very
chocolate
good,
that they throw instead of just the fireballs. But because we're running really late, but they do address that. Then specifically, they address that.
That's a very good question.
Yeah. All right, so there's other stuff that they have to have, and again, this is for all tiers. They do need to have written operating procedures and instructions. Very often, who's going to write the instructions for operating an off-the-shelf kind of treatment system? Manufacturer. Right, where's my operating manual? Well, here it is. They need to have that. It would be nice if they actually read that. Right? It's required for all tiers except for permit by rule. What? Why would that be? Mistake in writing the statute.
Yeah.
They just forgot to put it in.
They're in different places. So the PBR is in regulation. The CA and CEs are all in law, in statute.
Yeah, it just didn't get in there. So, tanker container integrity assessments. This is the 5-year PE certification and assessment. Talk very quickly about it later. Sometimes you can never mind this. You need a tanker container integrity assessment, typically for CA and PBR.
Right. And conditionally exempt. These is the lowest. Let's take a look and see what they need. They need clean closure after shutdown. That's basically it. And they need to tell the Coupa after they've cleaned up. So they don't have to have a big plan. They don't have to have any certification. They just need to do it and then tell them, hey, we've done it. So you can go out as a Coupa and verify that it got done. So there's timelines. Within 180 days, get rid of the residuals, and within 90 days. And then the Coupa notification post-closure. The CE limited, only for oil water separators. Aerosol cans is gone. And we'll talk about laundries on a separate one. And specialized waste stream. This is no volume limit, but this is not very hazardous stuff. So there's a definition of special waste.
Yeah. And typically what DTSC cautions, if a facility is trying to do conditional exempt limited or conditional exempt specialized waste stream, they can't be operating any other tiers of that facility.
So you can't
Those
be a
are really
PBR
intended
and,
for small facilities. It's not like, okay, I have a PBR system over here and a CEL operation over here. Like the conditional exemptions are really designed for the limited waste operations.
Right.
All right. So, some more of the conditional exempt small quantity treatment. Again, as Steve mentioned before, essentially no limit on the kind of waste, but very small quantities. And again, if there's any other waste treatment, you can't use this small quantity treatment. You can't, because they said, look, small quantity treating, if you're treating more elsewhere, you're not going to really be able to do it. And for laundries, people think it's only for oily rags. The way the statute's written, for reusable soiled textile materials. Well, I've got some, other contaminants. It's not just oil on there. They're not using rags to soak up the spill, the big spill. But there may be more than just used oil on that rag. Any kind of industrial textile. No post-use added hazardous waste. It's like, here's my dirty shop rags. Hey, why don't I use these to soak up all this other hazardous waste and then send it out? No, can't do that. And no free liquids, which kind of limits, they really shouldn't be saturated because ultimately, those free liquids will drain out. And the generating facility, you can send it to a commercial laundry. They're not a hazardous waste, conditionally. They need to be labeled soiled textiles for laundry. Right? It's on the container, right? And they send it to the laundry. Facility has to keep records of how much they sent. The laundry itself has to keep records of how much they laundered. They're certainly going to have wastewater treatment. Hopefully, they have wastewater treatment permits that are going to have, treatment methods and discharge limits part of their permit. They have to have leak-proof wash systems, so they can't be, who's your used textile laundering company? Oh, the people down at the river on the rocks. Not good. Right? They need to be biennially inspected by the CUPA. Now, the sludge that comes out of the washing systems may very well be a hazardous waste that's generated.
So, a couple little points on this. This is not where the other CE, I don't know if you had the code section on the other slides, but this is in a totally different section. This is 25201, where all these are. This is 25144. You'd have to go here to find it.
Yeah, because they're running out of numbers.
And the thing as an inspector to watch out for, you go out to a facility and they're washing their own rags at their site. So what are they doing? They're doing this. They need a conditionally exempt permit to do it. They're treating.
Wash
So that's another, incentive to have a laundry service. Yeah, you can do it yourself, but you're going to have to meet your permit requirements. Yes? Anybody that washes commercial stuff. So if you wash uniforms, towels, rags, any of that is commercial.
And, you wash your own stuff, you're not a commercial laundry. You send it to somebody that's paid for it, commercial laundry.
Well, if you're receiving anybody's stuff, you're commercial laundry. No, you can't.
I gotta write a check to my wife.
That's all right.
Separate your underwear from your jeans? Well, not without a stick.
Who expects the commercial laundries?
The Koopas. Yeah. All right, so now we bump up and we go to conditional authorization. We got more writing on the slide. Wait till we get to PBR, to fine print.
But lots of stuff. There's,
So again, in health and safety code, and it says annual waste minimization. So each year they have to tell the CUPA they have a program in place to minimize the amount of waste that they generate.
Right.
Tank and or containment integrity assessments. So they have to be assessed by qualified, registered, God-fearing.
So a small quantity generator, and they ordinarily wouldn't need the tank and container integrity assessment. The fact that they're under CA, now they have to do those assessments.
Right.
Right.
The Phase 1 environmental assessment checklist, written inspection plan, logged inspection. So that's something that you're going to want to look at the facility when you do the inspections out there. Provide written notification of closure upon completion. So again, they don't have to have that whole plan. More detailed operating instructions in CE. They need to know recognition and response to upsets. So these are things that you want to look for that they're dealing with in their plan. Contingency plan implementation, determination of treatment effectiveness. So they have to make sure that what they're doing is being effective.
Yeah, under PBR, and again, see now it's in the regulations. You look at PBR, again, basically they have to restrict their treatment to the processes that are specifically listed, permanently mark the exterior of each unit, talked about, unit, EPID number, name of the facility, the name of the unit. So when you look at the application, you look at the flow chart, and you look at the process flow, right? It's going to be, a flocculation tank number 1, filter press number 2. You're going to see all that. When you go on site at the facility, the signs and or labels and or markings on those units need to match their diagram. Show me where filter tank number 2 is. Well, we got our tank over there. It doesn't say filter tank number 2, it says holding tank. Well, yeah, but that's kind of where it filters. It doesn't match the application. It needs to match. So you could see it. They have to keep the following documents at the facility: a written waste analysis plan with the required elements in the waste analysis plan. They have to have a written inspection schedule, weekly inspection, daily inspection. They need to have training documents, basically, training the operators in how to operate or emergency procedures, and again, a contingency plan. Again, relate not just the overall facility plan, but in case something bad happens to that system. And you can complete, and the CUPA can determine what the dates. Some of these have to be submitted annually. The regs say January 1st, but if the CUPA wants them March 1st or whenever, as long as it's whatever the CUPA wants in terms of the submission date.
That's what my question was first.
Whenever you want.
For PBR renewals, the date is in law, it's January 1, but closure cost estimates, people have different
That's
yeah. I guess you can accept it when
yeah, well,
there's no deadline date for that.
Well, yeah, that's because typically the index of the inflation index numbers tends to come out first quarter
price
of the
deflator.
Year. Yeah, the price deflator.
The implicit
price.
We cover that.
All right, some more stuff. You have to submit your tank and container integrity assessment for CUPA review, not just keep it on site. You have to have a current closure plan that needs to be submitted, not just notify after it's done, not just keep it on site. You have to have a closure plan that's submitted. Again, update the closure costs. Yeah, but it's if you, the CUPA, decide you want it on a different schedule, as long as it's done. Now, when you look at the regulations, you would think that the higher the tier, the more the requirements. The requirement to have written operating instructions, you don't see it in the PBR requirements in the regs. It's kind of you would think you would think you need it, and you do. But if they don't have it, you may have difficulty citing them specifically because the requirement is missing out of the regulations. Right? Same thing for the waste minimization certification, though it's on the forms. But what you can do is the CUPAs have the authority to require a detailed annual report of operations and da-da-da-da-da. You can put it in there. It's like, well, as part of your report, we would like to see your written operating instructions. So there's ways around it. And then, any other kind of on-site required report, air records, wastewater records, etc. The written waste analysis plan, I think I have some examples in the handout, but basically you need to describe in a written plan, and the specific requirements are listed. Waste determination methods, of course, these are the allowable methods. We've seen waste analysis plans, so well, let me see your waste analysis plan for your PBR or your CA system. And they hand me their monthly self-monitoring reports that they send to the wastewater district. It's like, that's not a waste analysis plan. Yeah, but we analyze no, you're analyzing your discharge. You need to go, what are you treating? How much are you treating? What's the concentration? The sanitation district self-monitoring reports, that's after you're done. And those aren't hazardous waste, right? For each waste stream that's being treated, what are your analytical parameters? What's being analyzed? Specific well, we're looking for metals using EPA method 6010B. We're doing pH per EPA method, stick your finger in it. Right? How frequently are you going to sample? And what's the rationale? Well, we're going to sample every 6 months because our waste generating process hasn't changed, it's consistent. We have, process records that show it's very consistent. And you're able to review this and determine, it's too variable or it's not variable, and get the rationale for that and require changes if necessary. Facility has to follow the plan, and they have to keep records of that. In many cases, facilities will use an outside consultant to write their waste analysis plan. Fine. It'd be nice if the facility actually read what their consultant wrote and implemented it and followed it and remembered that they actually have it. Not when the inspector is at the door. Did you write one for me? Yeah, 5 years ago, pal. So it's a living document. You have to actually implement it. Just an example. What's in this tank? Oh, I don't know, it's water. Well, what else? There's solid goo in there. Okay, maybe it contains that. They need to know. Right? They need to know the variable. You need to know. And here's just a real quick example. Facility under construction. This is their wastewater treatment system. Nice and simple, right? Although the process waste come out, they hit the, quote, batch tank, right? Maybe there's probably a couple of neutralization tanks. Why do they need a waste analysis plan? How many generating process areas do they have? All of them.
That's what's going in.
That's what's going in. That's why a waste analysis. They can't just say, well, here's what this waste is, and here's how we're treating it. No. What's this waste going in?
And this is reality. I mean, this is what you see out there.
Yeah. Now, what should this facility have done instead? Combined everything before it became visible. That's why I'm a consultant. But this is why you want to walk the process. Because if you see one pipe coming out of there, there's the system and you're looking at it, right?
You go upstream.
You go upstream and you look at the processes and you got tanks everywhere. Where's the pipe? Well, it goes there. Well, yeah, but get the information on what's happening upstream. Right? You have to have written operating instructions. Those written operating instructions, they don't have to be hugely detailed, but they need to have something. How do you operate this system? Well, we call Bob. And Bob knows everything, right? Well, how does Bob operate? Well, he knows how to operate it. Well, how? What kind of instructions does he have? What's in writing? You need to have something. The more complicated the system, the more complicated the instructions. All right? And I know we're running behind, so...
We're running behind?
Strangely enough.
All right, so sampling issues. And we got a clearer picture today because...
the old one was a little fuzzy.
It was a little fuzzy, so we upgraded. So where do you want to sample? Again, for this, it's very important to sample upstream, the point of generation. That's why Leon's class tomorrow on advanced hazardous waste, great class to go to because get some details on point of generation. But you can't just go at the end. You can't look at what the waste is at the bottom. You need to look at what's going into it.
And not just what's going in. If you're trying to determine, is this a hazardous waste, is this a hazardous waste, remember the specific methods, right? Lab analysis, certified lab, knowledge of the generation process, right? What's going out to the public owned treatment works, probably a sanitation district certified lab. But what about just trying to find out what's happening is my treatment effective? Can they use pH paper?
Yeah.
All the intermediate steps, there's all kinds of various ways, the hack water treatment testing, the little field kits, that's fine. Testing to see, well, is there anything chemically, physically happening when I'm simply combining it, right? You're going to want to know what's happening there. Am I going to blow up if I mix these things together, right? So even though from a regulatory standpoint, they have to sample and analyze here, they have to determine what the waste is going in. You really want to know what's happening all through that process. You just do. Take a look at the Cal-Coupa Forum Board guidance document for hazardous waste tank assessments. Gives you all kinds of information. Jose from DTSC mentioned Monday that they're taking a look at it and they're going to want some changes in it in terms of how do you do a hazardous waste tank assessment, and that's a whole nother issue. And this is why. This is another reason why, just to see how good the secondary containment is, seismic stability. There's all kinds of stuff. And in my experience with a lot of my clients who are doing hazardous waste treatment and tiered permit treatment, the biggest issue is not the tiered permit process and information and all that stuff. It's like you need a tank assessment. And there's going to be all kinds of changes that are needed. And that can be very expensive. There's a lot of people who don't understand what a proper hazardous waste tank assessment is in their engineering firms. You really want to make sure that they meet all the specific individual regulatory requirements. For some systems like this, they may need to hire a structural engineer as part of that assessment to verify that this meets current seismic code. And that may involve a huge amount. We did a hazardous waste tank assessment tiered permit for a fairly large metal finishing and other kind of facility. The tank assessment, all that paperwork itself ran about, $15,000. $250,000 to redo the foundations because it was just concrete with no structural integrity. Couldn't get anyone to sign off the structural certification. Anything more than a 4-point earthquake, it was melting into the ground. And they had to upgrade their facility. It was built well before the code applied. There was no plan check. Somebody went out there with a concrete truck. Just different stuff you're going to see, right? So that's why you're going to want to see the signs on the tank. You may want to see better pipe supports. You certainly want to see arrows for process flow. Understand where everything is coming from, where everything is going to. Daily inspections, perhaps, on, including, the treatment chemicals and things like this that you want to see. Seismic attachments.
So this is why it's got to be redone every 5 years, because it's not static. Once it's a certified system, and how about doing inspections on sludge dryers? Those things just rust out so fast because the moisture in the air just eats them up.
They never look like this.
But they do on the brochure.
They do on the brochure.
And there's a system that's never been used. You can tell right away.
Right. Very nice.
This one's been in place for a day. But yeah, it's just, plus inspections, having to get back behind your operating instructions for all this. This is why there's the emergency response, tool right there. All right, financial assurance. This says spare change for beer. This is us post-retirement. Right? Now, the financial assurance applies to closure cost estimates only for conditionally authorized and PBR facilities. You have to basically say, yes, I can afford to close my tiered permit system. Right? Here's my closure cost estimate. Here's what it's based on. Not just pulling numbers out of the air, right? It's based on this, that, and the other. And here's how I make sure I have this money aside. Closure costs or closure bonds, financial assurance, insurance.
Right.
It needs to be based on something.
DTSC has a guidance document. This class, we don't have time to go and cover financial assurance. We talk about it, they got to have it, but we can't go into detail and say what it is.
Right.
You got to go to the guide.
And you look at the forms, okay, here's the mechanisms that you can use. What's it based on? Little lines here. And it has to be based on, again, on something that's defensible. We do closure cost estimates, and I think there's an example. It's like we say, okay, if we have to close this thing as a 500-gallon tank, how much to get rid of 500 gallons of this pre-treated stuff? We call up 2 or 3, contractors. We say, okay, we have the stuff. How much would it cost? Now we'll charge you, $2,000. All right, I'll up that to 3. It's going to cost up to $3,000, right? How much to clean the area? Facility says, hey, we'll have our guys clean the area and hose it down because you can assume that it's not contaminated, not leaking. Well, we'll have our guys clean the area. All right, how long do you think it'll take, the 2 or 3 guys to do it? It'll probably take them 2 days. All right, what do you pay them? Right, okay, 2 or 3 guys by 24 hours by humping up an hour. Right, and put that in there. Well,
so
we're going to use the Home Depot people. No. Right, but anyway, this is what, and what you want to see in the closure cost estimate. You want to see a line item, not just we think it's going to be, for the self-certificate, we think it's going to be $9,950. What's that based on?
Right,
and you have to look at the detailed fake numbers.
So if they put $100 for a PE certification, again, this is an independent PE, no credible PE.
For closure.
For closure.
Right, so this is the closure cost. There also has to be a closure plan. How am I going to close the facility? I'm going to sample here. I'm going to test here. I'm going to do this, do that, do the other. A PE does not need to sign that closure plan. The PE does not need to sign the closure cost estimate. But after the facility or the treatment permit operation closes, they have to implement that closure plan. The independent PE has to review the work and verify and stamp and certify that the closure that was done was consistent with the closure plan.
Right. But that has to be part of the estimate, the cost.
Oh yeah, it has to be part of the
That's what I brought it up
for. Oh
yeah.
Yeah. How much is that going to cost?
Well,
if somebody says $100 for the PE, I need to know who that PE is because I need their stamp on several projects. Right? So this is just a quick example of here's how much everything's going to cost, here's what it is, right? There's an issue. What if you decide, hey, I used to be in tiered permitting, but hey, I could tweak my system and then have an exempt treatment, have an exempt recycling system? That's great, but there's no provision in the regulations to do that. So what's been done in a couple of jurisdictions, they're like, you know what, that's fine to do it, but we're going to, because you can't really go through closure if you're still using the thing. So they said, all right, tell you what, we'll get you out of tiered permitting, but we're going to send you a letter, and you have to acknowledge it saying, all right, that's fine, you're out of tiered permitting, but you have to promise that when your recycling system closes, you're going to go through proper.
So you
closures.
keep that. You're not charging them for a tiered permit anymore, but you are still keeping that closure plan active.
And keep in mind that even if it's a tiered permit exempt on-site recycling system, if they're a large quantity generator, the tank assessment PE requirements still apply because they're a large quantity generator, even though it's an exempt recycling system.
Inspection tips.
Inspection tips.
There's no dot on that.
No, there's not. Inspection tips. A couple of things to look at. All right. It's in your handout or online. You know, there's DTSC inspection guidance. I think it's 15 years old now. It's still good. It's old, but it's good. Like Scotch.
That's right.
Right. Quick, because we're
3 minutes.
Whoever's bugging out early, save us a couple of seats.
So what's in the Coupa files, what's at the facility files? The bottom line is when you do a tiered permit inspection, especially PBR, plan to go to the facility, get a table, sit down, ask for all the documents, and spend some time going through it. Be familiar before you go out there, because you are not going to have in your file a lot of this information. You're going to get it at the facility. So what I like to do is I like to prepare ahead of time, review the file. Then when I go to the facility, sit down and go through their stuff, look at it. And then I like to go out to the facility and walk around and try to verify in the field what I saw in the diagrams. Because remember, we were looking at the pictures, how complicated the pictures are compared to the diagrams. All right.
So that's the kind of stuff you're going to do. You know, bring the application packet with you out of the field. You know, verify. Ask questions. What about this? Take your notes.
Keep going.
Remember, field verification. You know, you look at their application. Very high tech. Everything's very nice, and that's kind of
what you see. Reality.
Right. That's very nice. Very nice.
I think we're done.
We are. No stickers. No direction of flow.
We'll show some pictures if you guys want to race over and get a spot for lunch. Please remember to evaluate us. Be specific. Tell us what we can do to improve this.
Besides, try and stay on time.
We can never say. The problem is it's a lot of information. And if we go fast, then nobody gets any value out of it. And, you know, and they only give us 4 hours, so. Hey, we got a clapping. I don't think we've ever.
I have what?
We got clap.
wait, here we go. There we go. That's the.
There, yeah. Free fireballs. Anybody wants a fireball before lunch or after lunch?
Fireball. Want one? Need it?
Well, I feel sorry for you guys. You know, we didn't make enough money for beers. Here's a couple beers.
Oh, we love you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. You want some scotch?
Wow, and they're cold. Yes.
Really appreciate everything. You answered my questions I really wanted to figure out here. Permit by rule. I just went, where the hell